Hello, it's Grandma again. Are you ready for Grandma's story time? I've got my story bag here. It's my bag with purple circles and golden elephants and blue circles and golden elephants and red circles. And it's my bag where Peter lives. Are you there, Peter? Come on out and say hello. What are you doing there? You're upside down. Come on out. You're happy to be back? Oh, yes. It was very good that they found out where the toys were, wasn't it? That made you happy? And you liked meeting Ho-Ho and Winks. You did. But you didn't like Mr. Grimm. I wonder if they can get back the magic wand. Let's get out the book. Here we are. The wishing chair again. And what chapter are we up to? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12? I think we're nearly halfway through the book. We're up to chapter 12. Okay, you go back in the bag. Oops, here it is. You go back in the bag. Put on your glasses, Grandma. And let's read The Wishing Chair again. Chapter 12. Chinky is naughty. I didn't know Chinky would be naughty. Morning school came to an end at last. Mr. Grimm rapped on his desk with his stick, Chinky's wand.
Attention, all of you,
he said.
Dinner will be in 10 minutes' time. Anyone who is late or has dirty hands or untidy hair will go without.
Winks groaned.
It's awful,
he said to Peter when Mr. Grimm had gone out.
There's never enough dinner for everyone. So Mr. Grimm just says, "Here you, your hair's untidy," or "Here you, your nails aren't clean." And about a dozen of us have to go without dinner.
What a dreadful school, said Peter. Why don't you run away?
How can we?
Said Wink.
You've seen the high wall around the grounds, and all the gates are locked. I wish I could get out of here. It's a horrid place. It would be really good if I could escape.
Would there be room for him on the wishing chair? Mollie whispered to Chinky. He's nice. I'd like to help him, Chinky.
So would I,
whispered back Chinky.
Well, we'll see.
Poor Chinky was one of the ones who had to go without his dinner. Mr. Grimm stood at the door of the dining hall as each brownie walked in. Every so often he pounced on one and roared at him.
Here, you haven't washed behind your ears. No dinner. Here, why aren't your nails scrubbed? No dinner.
And then when Chinky tried to slip past him, he hit him hard on the shoulder with his hand and roared,
Here, why haven't you brushed your hair? No dinner.
Did brush it,
said Chinky indignantly.
But it's the kind of hair that won't lie down.
No dinner today for untidy hair, and no dinner tomorrow for answering back,
said Mr. Grimm.
Oh, I say, that's not fair,
said Chinky.
And no dinner for the third day for being rude,
said Mr. Grimm.
And another word from you, and I'll cane you with this new stick of mine.
He slapped the wand down so hard on a nearby table that Chinky was afraid it would break in half. But fortunately it didn't. Chinky went out of the room and looked angry and sulky.
Horrid Mr. Grimm.
He joined all the other brownies who were also going without their dinner. Peter and Mollie felt very sorry for Chinky. When the pudding came, they tried to stuff 2 tarts into their pockets to take to him. But the pastry fell to pieces, and their pockets were all jammy and horrid. Mr. Grimm saw the crumbs of pastry around their pockets as they marched past him after dinner. He tapped them with the wand.
Aha! Trying to stuff food in your pockets, greedy children. No dinner for you tomorrow.
Peter tried to snatch the wand away from Mr. Grimm, hoping that he could run and give it to Chinky. But Mr. Grimm was too quick for him. Up in the air it went, and poor Peter got a stinging slash on his arm. Fortunately, his sleeve was thick and he didn't feel it too much.
Bad boy.
Roared Mr. Grimm.
Stay in after school this afternoon and write out 1,000 times, I must not snatch.
There was a little time before afternoon school. Peter, Chinky, Mollie and Winks had a meeting in the far corner of the grounds.
Winks, that is my wand Mr. Grimm has got, and he's using it for a stick,
said Chinky. Winks whistled.
Whew, I say, that's a fine bit of news. We ought to be able to do something about that. But what?
Asked Chinky.
I'm so afraid he'll break my wand, and then it will be no use. Somehow or other we have to get it back. Now listen,
said Winks.
A wand will never hit its owner, you know. You know that. Well, what about being very naughty in class this afternoon and having to go up to Mr. Grimm to get punished? And your wand will refuse to cane you, of course. So surely you can easily get it back then and do a bit of magic for yourselves free. Oh, yes,
said Chinky, looking very cheerful.
That's an awfully good idea of yours. Winks, I'd forgotten that a wand never turns on its owner. I'll be very naughty and then we'll see what happens.
They all went in the afternoon to afternoon school feeling rather excited. What would happen? It would certainly be fun to see Chinky being very naughty, and then even greater fun to see the wand trying to punish him. Chinky began by yawning very loudly indeed. Mr. Grimm heard him and tapped hard on his desk with the wand. Crack, crack.
Chinky, you are most impolite. Stand up during the rest of class instead of sitting.
Chinky stood, but he stood with his back to Mr. Grimm. Mr. Grimm glared.
Bad Pixie, you are being impolite again. Stand around the other way.
Chinky immediately stood on his hands and waved his feet in the air. All the brownies laughed and clapped. Mr. Grimm looked as black as thunder.
Come here,
he cried, and Chinky began to walk towards him on his hands. He really looked very funny indeed. Winks laughed until tears rolled down his cheeks. But Mr. Grimm didn't try to cane him that time. He told him to go and stand in the corner, the right way up. So Chinky stood in the corner the right way up, turning every now and then to grin at all the others. Mr. Grimm began firing questions at the glass.
Hands up those who know why brownies have long beards. Hands up who knows the word for disappear. Hands up those who know why green smoke always comes out of witches' hands up. Hands up.
He didn't even wait for anyone to answer. So the brownies just shot up their hands at each question and then put them down again and waited for the next. Peter and Mollie thought it was the silliest class they'd ever attended.
And now, Can anyone ask me a question I can't answer?
said Mr. Grimm.
Aha! It would take a very clever brownie to do that. Be careful, because if I can answer, you'll have to come up and be punished. Now, who will ask a question I can't answer?
The brownies had all been caught by this trick before, so no one put up their hand. Mr. Grimm pounced on poor Winks.
You, Brownie, can't think of a question?
Yes, sir.
Said Winks at once.
I'd like to know why gooseberries wear whiskers. Do they belong to the brownie family?
Everyone roared at this ridiculous question, except Mr. Grimm. He looked as grim as his name. He rapped with his stick on the desk.
Come up here, Winks. I will not have you upsetting the class like this with your silly remarks.
And Winks went up grinning. He got 3 strokes of the wand, but it didn't hurt him, of course, because as he had still got the spell on his hands that prevented the stick from hurting him.
I've got a question,
called out Chinky, seeing a chance to get his wand.
What is it?
Said Mr. Grimm, frowning.
Mr. Grimm, why do horses wear hooves instead of feet?
Asked Chinky.
Come up here,
Said Mr. Grimm sternly.
That's another silly question.
Chinky went.
Hold out your hand.
Said Mr. Grimm. Chinky held it out. Mr. Grimm brought down the wand as hard as he could. But dear me, it missed Chinky's hand altogether. The wand simply slipped to one side and didn't touch Chinky's hand at all. Mr. Grimm tried again and again and again, but each time the wand slid away from Chinky's outstretched hand and hit the desk instead. It was very puzzling indeed for Mr. Grimm. The brownies were all laughing, so were Peter and Mollie. Mr. Grimm's face was so comical to watch as he tried to hit Chinky's hand, but he couldn't.
I shall break this stick in two,
he suddenly said in a rage. That gave Chinky a shock.
No!
He shouted.
No, you mustn't! You mustn't!
Why not?
Said Mr. Grimm, and he put both hands on the wand as if to break it. Peter and Mollie and Chinky watched in despair, waiting for the crack. But the wand wasn't going to let itself be broken. It slid out of Mr. Grimm's big hands and shot over to Chinky, who caught it as it came.
Ha!
Shouted Chinky in delight.
I've got it! My lovely wand! I've got it!
What? It's a wand?
Said Mr. Grimm in astonishment.
I didn't know that. Give it back to me.
He snatched at it, but Chinky was skipping around the room waving it.
I'll give you all half a holiday,
he said.
Yes, I will. See my wand waving to give you all half a holiday. Go into the garden and play, all of you.
The brownies didn't wait. They rushed out of the room at top speed, shouting and laughing. Soon only Mollie, Peter and Chinky were left with Mr. Grimm. Winks was peeping around the door.
How dare you treat me like this?
Shouted Mr. Grimm, marching towards Chinky.
I'll...
Go back, back,
chanted Chinky, and he waved his wand at Mr. Grimm, whose feet at once took him 6 steps backwards, much to his surprise.
You see, I've got magic in my wand,
said the pixie.
Aha! And I may have powerful magic, Mr. Grimm.
Come on, Chinky, whispered Peter. Let's go and find the wishing chair and fly off. But I want my doll Rosebud before we go, said Mollie. Have you forgotten your engine and all the toys? We must take those with us. Mr. Grimm, will you give us our toys?
Certainly not.
Said Mr. Grimm, and he shook a large key at them.
See this key? It's the key of the storeroom, and I've locked it. You can't get your toys, you never shall.
We'll see about that,
said Chinky.
We'll see about that, Mr. Grimm.
And that's the end of that chapter. Wasn't it good that they got the magic wand back? They didn't get Rosebud or the engine, but they got the wand, so that's a start. Come back tomorrow and we'll see what happens next. Bye-bye.